D&D and Microtransactions. Just some of my thoughts on the matter. Ah yes, I was there when the first large mainstream streaming game of D&D added microtransaction. This was Acquisitions, Team C. Now, of course, this was following the style of funding that most streamers, large and small, use. And I'm sure that most wouldn't consider it a microtransaction or downloadable content. But at the end of the day, someone pays a fee, which results in a clear benefit in a game of D&D. And many other people, besides me, took notice. More on that later. There are many lessons that we can learn from what happened in the video game industry regarding microtransactions, notably that smaller companies avoided the worst aspects of microtransactions because they realized at the end of the day how anti-consumer those practices can get. Thus, we have cosmetic-only microtransactions and less scummy approaches. It seems like larger corporations, however, just can't avoid the temptation of getting more money from children and whales with microtransactions that allow an abjectly better gaming experience for those who pony up the cash. Thankfully, Wizards of the Coast is a relatively small company in the grand scheme of things, and the parent company Hasbro seems busy enough with other endeavors to kind of avoid this sort of stuff. The fact is, the only real microtransaction that the tabletop game has is the purchase of piecemeal books on D&D Beyond, and frankly, that is more of a convenience, and you can always buy the rest of the books later at a discounted price if you've already bought some of the content. The rather recent confusing Twitter claims that having multiple base books is a bad business model kind of feeds into this. This was a rather silly argument because most players and some cash-strapped GMs/DMs really only have to buy the player's manual to play a full game of D&D, or simply use the free rules to run a full game until they can eventually buy the books. The selling of multiple books as a business strategy is frankly the most consumer-friendly model out there. And at the end of the day, you don't have to buy them all. I think this argument has to do with more... I'm tempted to assume this argument has to do more with people wanting to push towards other RPGs than having any real complaints about Wizards of the Coast's selling books. So, is this the end? Is D&D safe from the dreaded slippery slope of the microtransaction? Unfortunately, while WotC doesn't seem to be heading in that direction, there are others that smell the money and are following it. Small D&D streams that are microtransactions to the hilt, and they are actively recruiting new D&D players by going into popular YouTuber discords, most notably the D&D animation YouTubers or the D&D limited animation. I don't know what we call the new breed of animators that sprung up after the real animators were kicked off of YouTube. Anyways, a lot of those people do D&D content, and if you go into their discords, I went in there was 3 D&D streams that were actively looking for new players, where it was clearly just a way for them to bring in more viewers, but more importantly, really push these new players to spend money on little bits and bobs so they could do better at the game. It's really disgusting. Like this is where like a lot of people that don't know much about D&D, they're probably going to end up on these discords because this is like very new player friendly content and whatnot. So they're going to go on these discords, and these large YouTubers obviously don't, they don't filter their discords, so they just have a looking for group section, and they just leave it open, and anybody can promote their games there. And so, thus you have all these, predatory D&D streaming games there that are trying to grab your players. And frankly, it doesn't end there. Microtransactions, not only in streaming games, but in physical game stores. So you have a game store whose business model doesn't actually allow them to get by as a game store. I've heard scenarios where they have a gashapon, a capsule toy machine, where players can just like pay a couple dollars and get like healing potions or weapons or advantage or inspiration from this little gashapon game thing and like use that in their game of D&D. In any other business, this would be considered nickeling and diming your valuable customers to death. Other game stores can successfully run their store without stooping to these methods. If you can't run a game store without stuff like this, then number one, your business plan isn't as good as other stores. Or you simply don't have enough business in your area to support your store, and I'm sorry, you shouldn't have started that business. Oh boy, what could be more fun than a little capsule toy that you can buy for $1 of real money so that you can have more fun with your D&D game? You know, I wasn't able to work a real job and earn money to myself until I was over the age of 18. Before that, my parents had me working very hard, clearing out cherry trees in the backwoods and doing construction projects, or splitting woods in the winter. There was always work, but I never got paid for any of these jobs as a teenager, and I never had any money at all. My parents pretty much made sure that I had no folding cash and would not give me an opportunity to earn money with a job until I moved out, basically, until I was over the age of 18. And that's a sad situation, but you know what? That's more common than people think. Younger people interested in the game of D&D, they're just not going to have the extra money for this nonsense. So it's just very frustrating. It's going to be a far better thing where you know that there's going to be a small table fee. So at least a dumb, poor teenager like I was is understanding what's going on, so they don't expect to be able to go there and pay for free and then be sidelined by these weird, real-life microtransactions. I have to consider there are so many people out there in the position I was when I was younger, but unfortunately in the media sphere that talks about D&D specifically, there doesn't seem to be anybody out there from my background that doesn't consider things. In a podcast that I just recently talked to, they were talking about how like fun and great it was. And it's just like, there was like, I don't know, 5 people talking on this podcast, and clearly none of them grew up poor. Because this is not an idea that is in any way interesting. It's not an idea that's fun. It's just a way to nickel and dime customers for a store that has a bad business plan. But they had nothing negative to say about it. It's really disgusting. So in the end, if you wait for the books to go on sale for around $60, you can get, and again, this is a common sale on online stores and whatnot, and even in the physical stores, they will sell stuff for cheaper prices. So $60 around that price. I mean, more, if you don't wait around, you probably have to pay, at least like, around $90 probably. You can buy all the books and have it. That's about the price of a video game. Video games apparently are going up to $70 per game for this next generation. So for the price of one video game, you can have these 3 sets of books, which then you could use for hundreds of hours of fun with really not that many other hidden costs. And that's what I love about this hobby. And what I don't love is people deliberately misconstruing, deliberately just getting the current D&D business model and making it seem bad, which is terrible because it's affordable to pretty much anybody. Originally, that's how the video game industry got sunk in this complete mess of a microtransaction system, because they claimed it would be better overall and have content that was cheaper for people. And that's not how it turned out. With all the extra third-party money that groups are raising. The Critical Role Animation Project exist, and all the strange uber high-end products that are out there now for D&D. I'm really worried that Hasbro is going to catch wind of this and think they can make money with a new system that's more akin to the current video game economy. It's my greatest hope that something will develop in the tabletop role-playing game system that's kind of the opposite of what's happening in video games now. Smaller third-party companies can depend on microtransactions and new methods of fan funding. And then the larger traditional companies, like Wizards of the Coast, can continue on with the old model of selling us books and gaming paraphernalia. And honestly, that's my greatest hope. That's what I hope will happen with the role-playing games industry. It won't go the way of the video game industry, where people all of a sudden realize that they don't really have to be selling video games to everybody. They just have to be selling video games to the people who can afford stuff like monthly fees and ridiculous garbage like that. And that's a really sad scenario, but I hope it's not going to happen. And all this Twitter talk about, talking crap about D&D's current economic model is just garbage. Because, this promise of some sort of microtransaction thing, where the game's going to be super cheap for everybody. Right now, D&D is super cheap for everybody. And there are no hidden costs. If we go to a new system, there will be hidden costs. In the current system, you don't have to buy all the books. You can get by with buying 1 or 2 of the books. Or you could just wait until a sale and spend $60 to $90 and get all 3 of the books. And I think that's a very fair system. That's what we need to stick with. So if you have any concerns or comments about what I've been blathering about today, please let me know in the comments below.